I'm about to walk into that boardroom with a man I found sleeping in my company's parking garage less than 12 hours ago. And if I'm wrong about him, we're both finished. The elevator shuddered as it dropped into the bowels of the garage, its cable song fading into a hush that always felt like a held breath. Claire Bennett stepped out alone, the doors closing behind her with a kiss of steel. It was 11:42 p.m., another night she'd traded for the altar of the deal. The concrete floor was so clean it reflected slivers of white from the fluorescent strips above. Her red-bottom heels tapped a crisp rhythm that echoed down the empty rows, confident, unhurried, a metronome for a life run precisely on time. She was built like a weapon and a promise, full hips that her white pencil skirt didn't bother to apologize for, a silk blouse that draped over generous curves, a waist cinched by a thin gold belt, hair pinned back, throat bare except for a thin chain. The kind of beauty that didn't ask permission. The kind of presence that made junior associates stand a little straighter when she walked by. She aimed her key fob toward her black Mercedes, and the taillights flashed to life. But something twitched at the edge of her vision. A shape, tucked in the shadow near a concrete pillar, and a low barrier used to keep carts from rolling into traffic. She turned her head, body tensing. Security should have cleared the garage hours ago. She was about to call the booth when her eyes adjusted and she realized the shape had shoulders, legs, a backpack curled to a chest like a shield. A man. Young. Black. Late 20s, maybe. Jacket neat but tired, jeans faded at the knees. He lay on flattened cardboard, back turned as if careful not to take up more space than necessary. A book rested near his hand, splayed open like a bird mid-flight. The gold letters on its spine caught the light. Principles of Corporate Finance. Claire's breath snagged. She didn't move. The garage hummed around them, vent fans, distant plumbing, the low mechanical pulse of a building that never slept. She shifted her weight, and the quick scrape of heel on concrete was enough. The man's eyes opened, sharp, awake. He registered her, the car, the clothes, the distance between their worlds, and in a beat his face settled into a resignation so practiced it hurt to see. "I'm sorry," he said, voice quiet, even. He was already sitting up, gathering the book, the backpack. Not panicked, efficient, like a man who'd packed in a hurry 1,000 times. "I know I shouldn't be here. I'll go." "Wait," Claire said before she meant to. The word hung between them with more power than it should have. "How did you get in?" He hesitated. A muscle in his jaw twitched, then flattened. "Loading dock. Sometimes the sensor misses the door. I never take anything. I never make a mess." His gaze didn't quite meet hers. "Just needed somewhere safe to sleep." Her eyes flicked to the book again, then back. The syllables of her training, risk, protocol, liability, marched across her mind and evaporated in the same second. "Are you a student?" "Was. Until about 18 months ago." "What happened 18 months ago?" He studied her, not hostile, diagnostic, like he was trying to read the market of her intentions. He said finally, "Lost my job, then my apartment, then most everything else." "What kind of job?" "Financial analyst." The corners of his mouth tried for humor and didn't make it. "Not at a place like this, small firm. But I was good." Claire felt something move in her chest. A low chord struck under the ribs. The distance between her corner office and this rectangle of cardboard felt enormous and terrifyingly thin, as if a gust of bad luck could blow anyone across it. "What's your name?" she asked. "Evan Price." "I'm Claire Bennett." The reflexive gesture toward the ceiling, the floors above, the empire of glass and polished wood, felt obscene, and she let her hand fall. "If you're good at financial analysis, why haven't you found another job?" He lifted one shoulder, not self-pitying, just factual. "Hard to get interviews without an address. Hard to feel confident without a suit that fits. Dry cleaning costs money I don't have." He glanced down at the book as if embarrassed to be caught believing in something. "But knowledge doesn't expire just because your circumstances change." His voice carried something expensive, education, precision, and the contrast with the cardboard under his shoulders hit him like cold water. There was a steadiness in him, a way he arranged his few possessions. The backpack wasn't a bag, it was a ledger of a life reduced to assets. "Evan, are you hungry?" His gaze snapped up. "I can't pay." "I asked if you're hungry." He waited, like a man who learned not to accept kindness he couldn't repay. After a moment, he nodded once. "Yeah." "There's a diner a few blocks over." She clicked her fob again. The Mercedes chirped. "Come with me." He stood, slinging the backpack across his shoulder. Up close, he was taller than she'd thought. Lean under the jacket, cheekbones cut clean under the low garage light. He kept his distance without making a point of it. When they stepped into the elevator, they stood on opposite sides. The mirrored stainless reflected them both, her white blouse and gold cuff, his careful posture, and the battered book peeking from his bag. A pair of strangers framed by their own duplicates. On the street, Denver at midnight felt like a city exhaling. Less traffic, more sky. They walked without talking. She took smaller steps, and he adjusted without seeming to. In the neon reflection of Murphy's diner window, their shapes overlapped for a second in the glass, and she felt something she refused to name. Inside, the place smelled like coffee and fry oil and sugar. Vinyl booths, chrome edges, the kind of counter where bad nights were turned into bearable mornings, one plate at a time. The waitress clocked the pairing, curvy blonde in a white skirt, man in a tired jacket with eyes like midnight, and didn't blink. She led them to a corner booth. 2 menus, 2 waters. The coffee arrived as if conjured. Claire wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the heat settle into her fingers. "Before 18 months ago, what did your days look like?" He smiled without teeth. "Early gym, desk by 8, numbers by 8:05. We did valuation work for mid-market manufacturers and logistics outfits. I liked the puzzle of it, finding what the market missed. I got good at reading patterns no one else was looking for." He touched the book's cover with 2 fingers, almost apologetic. "Graduated summa cum laude from UC, CFA after that. The owner at Redmont taught me to see through noise." And then the noise swallowed the signal. He huffed out something like a laugh. "That's one way to put it. Redmont's owners sold to a bigger firm. Redundancies got eliminated. Last in, first out. 6-week severance and a very nice letter saying I was exceptional. Unemployment? Ran out. Savings went to rent and student loans. When the rent slipped, I moved in with a friend. When that burned out, I rented a room. Then the car. Then the sidewalk." He said it simply. "A timeline. Not a tragedy." "And the arrests?" she asked, because it was better to say the hard thing than circle it forever. "Sleeping in a doorway, and for loitering while using the Wi-Fi outside a cafe. Nothing violent, but it shows up." Her jaw locked. She felt the old rage, polite, professional, contained, spark in a place she'd learned to keep cold. She thought of her colleagues who talked about human capital like it was a tank you topped off, never a person who could drown. "What would it take to get you in front of someone who would actually listen?" "Address. Phone. Close. A story that doesn't sound like a warning sign. And somebody willing to say, yes, he had a gap, and no, it doesn't matter." The waitress slid plates onto the table, eggs over easy for him, a late-night salad for her that she already regretted. Evan didn't fall on the food. He paused first, steadying the fork in his hand like breath before a dive, and only then did he eat. It was the smallest thing, and it unfolded her. They ate mostly in silence, the kind that comes when 2 people are listening to their own thoughts, and the other person isn't an interruption. When the plates were cleared, and the coffee had cooled into something tar-like, Claire said, "Evan, I have an idea." She heard the lilt in her voice and knew it well, the one that meant she already made a decision. His eyes lifted. "Okay." "I have a presentation at 9, a big one. If I land it, I'm a lock for partner. It's an acquisition pitch for a company everyone thinks they understand. I don't think they do. I think there's a pattern in the R&D spend that nobody's named yet. I want you to look at the deck with me. And, if you see what I think you'll see, I want you in that room." He blinked once, then twice. You want me to present in your boardroom tomorrow morning as my consulting analyst. A quiet laugh slipped out of him, disbelieving and soft. I don't have a suit. I don't have a phone that holds a charge. I have 2 arrests for being poor. Claire, I can do the work. I just can't pass as the kind of man your partners will listen to. I can solve clothes. I can solve a phone.
I can solve passing. The only thing I can't manufacture is your mind. He looked at her for a long time, then set his palms flat on the formica, as if to steady the table or himself. Why me? Why this? Because you're the first person I've met in months who isn't selling a version of themselves they don't even believe in, she wanted to say. Because I'm tired of winning deals that don't change anything that matters. Because I saw the book on the floor and it felt like a flare. Because you're good. And because if I'm going to gamble my future, I'd rather do it on a truth than on a performance. He breathed out. All right, he said, voice low and certain. Then let's tell the truth so well they mistake it for inevitability. She smiled, quick, involuntary. When they stepped back into the night, the city felt different, as if some axis had tilted a degree. She unlocked the car, and he paused. Claire, he said, if this goes wrong, then it's on me, she said. I'm the one asking. He shook his head. No, then it's on both of us. Partnership or nothing. She held out her hand. He took it. His palm was warm, calloused, a contract without paper. They drove through quiet streets toward her apartment, the kind of glass-walled space that made magazines thirsty. He looked out at the lights as if memorizing them. She looked ahead and felt the first real flicker of fear. Not of failure, of change. In the elevator up to her floor, they stood side by side again, 2 reflections framed in steel, both looking a little like the future. Evan, she said, and her voice surprised her. Softer than steel, sharper than mercy. What if I could change everything? He turned his head. The corner of his mouth lifted. Murphy's Diner sat on the corner like it had been welded there decades ago, stubborn against the creep of gentrification that had swallowed most of downtown. Its neon sign flickered a little, buzzing like an old man clearing his throat. Through the steamed-up windows, Claire could see the faint glow of chrome edges, red vinyl booths, and the slow choreography of night-shift waitresses moving between tables. The air outside smelled faintly of wet pavement and fry oil, even though the streets were dry. She pulled the Mercedes into a spot beside a pickup with rust creeping up its wheel wells. Evan stepped out carefully, backpack still slung over one shoulder, hands in his jacket pockets. He looked around like a man cataloging exits without meaning to, the way you do when you've slept in too many places where you weren't welcome. Inside, the warmth hit them immediately. Coffee, bacon, something sweet on the griddle. The waitress at the door gave them a quick once-over, her expression unreadable. Claire was used to the subtle double take her presence caused in places like this, thick curves poured into a white silk blouse, hair swept up in a sleek knot, the scent of Chanel still clinging to her. Here, she looked like someone who belonged in the glossy magazine on the rack by the door, not in a midnight diner booth. "Anywhere you like?" the waitress said. They slid into a corner booth, the kind where you could see the whole room but keep your back to the wall. Evan's posture loosened only slightly once he was seated. The waitress poured coffee without asking and left them with menus. Claire didn't open hers. "You look like you've been in here before." 1,000 diners, not this one. They're all cousins, different names, same coffee. "Family resemblance," she said, taking a sip. It was better, a little burnt. Perfect diner coffee. He glanced at her across the table. "Why'd you really invite me here?" She smiled faintly. "Because I wanted to know what you'd say if I asked the right questions, and I couldn't ask them in a parking garage with security cameras watching. You think I'd talk to you more in a booth than by a pillar? People talk more over coffee. It's one of those unwritten rules." He let the corner of his mouth lift,
just a little, before turning his attention to the menu. You're probably one of those people who orders salads at midnight. And you're probably one of those people who orders breakfast no matter what time it is. He chuckled, and the sound was low and warm. You'd win that bet. When the waitress returned, Evan ordered eggs over easy with bacon and hash browns. Claire did, in fact, order a salad. The waitress jotted it down and walked away without a word. Claire leaned forward, resting her forearms on the table. Tell me about before, not the summary version. I want the real one. He turned his mug slowly in his hands. Before what? Before 18 months ago. Evan's gaze dropped for a second, then came back up steady. I grew up in Aurora, working-class neighborhood. Dad was a mechanic. Mom cleaned office buildings downtown. She used to bring home paper from the recycling bins so I could draw on the backs. I was good at math, so I followed the numbers. CU Boulder, partial academic scholarship, finance and economics. Graduated summa cum laude. Claire lifted an eyebrow. That's impressive. I worked for Redmont Analytics. Small firm, maybe 20 employees. But we did good work. Valuations, sector analysis, forecasting. I liked it. It felt like solving puzzles no one else had noticed. What happened? The owner decided to retire. Sold the firm to a bigger fish. They had their own analysts. Last in, first out. I got 6 weeks severance and a very nice letter saying I was excellent. Claire thought of all the acquisition deals she'd handled where names disappeared from payroll spreadsheets. She'd never really pictured where they ended up, certainly not under a concrete pillar in her parking garage. Unemployment benefits? Ran out. Savings went to rent and student loans. After that, I stayed with a friend for a while. When that got awkward, I found a room in a boarding house. When I couldn't make rent there, I stayed in my car until it was repossessed. Then, shelters, whenever there was space. Sometimes just a quiet corner somewhere no one would bother me. Claire studied him for a moment. And through all that, you kept studying? He shrugged, almost embarrassed. Knowledge doesn't become worthless just because you do. Reading, it reminds me who I am, who I was before. Before she could respond, the waitress brought their plates. Evan's eyes lingered on the food for a beat before he picked up his fork. He didn't eat fast. He didn't hunch over it. He ate like a man who had learned to savor what was in front of him. She took a bite of her salad, then set down her fork. What would it take to get you back into finance? He chewed, swallowed, and set his fork down, as if to give the question weight. A phone, an address, clothes that don't look like they've been slept in, and someone willing to take a risk on me despite an 18-month gap. He hesitated. And a way to explain away a couple of vagrancy arrests. Her brows knit. For what? For sleeping in a doorway, one for sitting outside a cafe too long using their Wi-Fi. He said it without bitterness, but it made her jaw tighten. They ate in silence for a while. The hum of conversation around them was low. 2 truckers debating fuel prices, a waitress laughing at something on her phone. Outside, a delivery truck hissed to a stop. When the coffee was down to its last lukewarm sips, Claire spoke again. Evan, I have an idea. He looked up. Should I be worried? She smiled faintly. Maybe. Tomorrow morning, I have a presentation. Big acquisition deal. If I land it, I make partner. But I think there's something in the numbers no one's caught yet. I think you'd see it. His brows rose. You want me to look at your deal? I want you in the room with me, as my consulting analyst. For a moment, he just stared at her. Then he leaned back, a slow shake of his head. That's insane. I don't have a suit. I don't have a cover story, and I don't exactly fit the image of someone your partners will take seriously. I can fix the clothes. I can fix the presentation. The one thing I can't fix is your mind, and that's the part I want in the room. His gaze held hers for a long beat. Why take that risk for me? Because you're good, and because if I'm going to gamble my future, I'd rather do it with someone who actually has something to say. He leaned forward again, forearms braced on the table. Claire, if this goes wrong, it could tank your career. Then we win, she said simply. or we go down swinging, but either way, I'd rather take the shot than play it safe and lose nothing worth keeping." He studied her for another long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, let's see if we can make them believe I belong there."
The night air was cool and clean as they stepped out of Murphy's, steam from the kitchen vent curling above the neon sign. Claire unlocked her Mercedes, and Evan hesitated just a second before walking around to the passenger side. She could see it in his face. He was weighing not just the ride, but everything that came with it. The drive back to her building was quiet in a way that wasn't uncomfortable. Denver after midnight was a softer city, traffic lights blinking yellow, storefronts dark, the hum of tires on asphalt filling the space between them. Claire's loft occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse in Lodo, all exposed brick, glass, and steel. When the elevator doors slid open, the view hit you first. A wall of windows looking out over the Denver skyline, the grid of lights stretching to the horizon. "This is..." Evan stepped inside, eyes sweeping the space. "Beautiful." "Thanks," she said, setting her keys on the granite counter. "Water?" "Please." As she filled 2 glasses, she watched him wander. Not nosy, just curious. He paused at the bookshelf, tracing the spines with a fingertip. "You have thinking fast and slow," he said, pulling the thick volume free. "Most people never finish it," Claire replied. "Most people haven't had their optimism bias stripped bare by personal experience." He smiled, but there was a weight behind it. "Turns out cognitive biases apply to survival as much as they do to investment decisions." She handed him the water. "Is that what happened to you? Biases?" He nodded slowly. "Overconfidence made me think my job was untouchable. Optimism made me believe I'd get another before the severance ran out. I learned the hard way that the market doesn't care how good you are when the whole sector's cutting." She leaned against the counter, watching him sip his water. "Tomorrow morning," she said carefully, "I have a presentation. If I nail it, I make partner. It's a huge acquisition, Midwest precision, the kind of deal the firm brags about for years." He set the glass down, giving him her full attention. "And you think I can help you with it?" "I know you can. There's a pattern in their R&D spending, steady increases without product releases. It's not in any of the projections my team's done. You'd see what I see, maybe more." Evan let out a short breath, almost a laugh. "You're talking about putting me in front of your partners, dressed like this, with nothing but my word that I can deliver?" "I'm talking about making you my consulting analyst. We fix the clothes, the presentation, and the backstory. The rest is you." He paced a little, the city lights reflected in the polished floor. "If they find out, we handle it." He stopped pacing, facing her. "Why risk your career for me?" "Because I've sat in that boardroom for years, listening to the same people say the same things. Because in a couple of hours with you, I've had sharper insights than I've heard in months. Because you deserve a shot." His gaze softened, but his voice stayed steady. "What's the offer?" She opened her laptop on the kitchen island, pulling up the deal file. "Midwest Precision. Aerospace and auto components. Revenue's solid. Stock is underperforming. Offer on the table is $600 million. He leaned over the screen, scanning quickly. His presence was suddenly different, focused, locked in. "Market cap's around 400, right?" "Yes." He clicked through the balance sheets. "Look at their R&D spend, up every quarter for 5 years, but no new product launches. That's a long game. They're working on something big and it's not public yet." Claire's pulse quickened. "You can tell that from this?" "I've seen it before. Small manufacturers betting on an innovation that changes their market position overnight. If Pierce Financial is moving now, it's because they know about it through the back channels. This isn't defensive, it's aggressive." She closed the laptop with a sharp snap. "Then tomorrow, we make sure they understand exactly what they're buying." He tilted his head. "You realize what you're asking me to do, right? Walk into a boardroom I have no right to be in, pretend I belong there, and hope no one looks too closely. You do belong there." And she said it with the certainty that surprised even her. "The rest is just presentation." The next morning, Claire was waiting outside Nordstrom's personal shopping department when the first employee arrived. Money and charm opened doors. She had both. By the time they walked out, Evan was unrecognizable to anyone who might have seen him in the garage the night before. The navy Tomford suit fit like it had been sewn for him. A crisp white shirt, a silk tie in a shade that made his skin look richer, Italian leather shoes that whispered money with every step. But more than the clothes, it was the way he wore them. Shoulders back, chin up, like a man who had never been told no. "You clean up well," Claire said, as they rode the elevator back to her loft. He adjusted a cufflink. "Clothes make the man, right?" He glanced at her. "How much did this cost?" "An investment." "In me?" "In our partnership," she corrected. At the loft, they went over the deck together. She handled the first half, market overview, financial stability, competitive positioning. He drilled into the second, undervaluation, R&D patterns, probable technological breakthroughs. The way he spoke about it was surgical, clear, precise, inevitable. At 8:45, they walked into the marble and glass lobby of Bennett and Carrington. Heads turned. No one asked who he was. They just assumed they should know him. The executive conference room was all polish and power, floor-to-ceiling windows, a table long enough to seat 20. The managing partner, Harrison Cole, rose as they entered. "Claire," he said warmly, "looking forward to hearing your thoughts. And you must be—" "Evan Price," Evan said with perfect confidence. "Independent analyst. Claire asked me to consult on the Midwest Precision Evaluation." "Well, I'm glad she did." They took their seats. Claire opened the presentation. Her voice was steady as she walked the partners through the familiar numbers, but when she got to the valuation section, she paused. "I believe our current model misses a key driver. Mr. Price will explain." Evan stood, taking her place at the head of the table. "Thank you, Claire." He turned to the screen. "Midwest's last 5 years show consistent R&D growth without corresponding revenue spikes. That's not inefficiency, it's incubation. They're developing composite materials that could cut aerospace component weight by 20% without sacrificing strength. That's a revolution waiting to happen." The room went still. He clicked to the next slide. Patent filings, manufacturing capacity expansion, a 2-year timeline. When this hits the market, they'll have a 3-year lead on competitors. At today's offer, you're buying that advantage for a fraction of its future value. One of the senior partners leaned forward. "You're saying we should offer more?" "I'm saying that in 18 months, $600 million will look like a bargain." Questions came rapid fire. Market impact, competitor readiness, manufacturing bottlenecks. He answered each without hesitation, weaving technical detail into plain language. When it was over, Harrison looked at Claire. "This changes everything. Instead of protecting market share, we're talking about owning the next generation of aerospace materials." "That's why I brought him in," she said simply. As they left the boardroom, Claire felt the adrenaline in her veins like champagne bubbles. They had pulled it off, not just gotten through, but won. In the elevator, Evan looked at her. "You realize you just gambled your career on a man you found sleeping in your parking garage." "And won," she said, smiling.
The glass doors of Bennett and Carrington closed behind them with a soft hiss, shutting out the hum of the boardroom. Claire felt the pulse in her throat begin to slow, though the charge of what they'd just done still fizzed through her blood. Evan walked beside her, his new suit cutting a clean line against the marble and chrome lobby. People glanced at him without quite knowing why, as if sensing they were supposed to recognize him. Outside, the spring sunlight bounced off the skyscraper glass, making the air seem brighter than usual. Claire unlocked her Mercedes, but instead of heading straight for the driver's seat, she leaned against the door. "That," she said, "wasn't just good. It was the kind of analysis they'll still be talking about next quarter." Evan looked down the street instead of at her, jaw set in that careful neutrality he seemed to wear like armor. "It worked. But you know this doesn't change my reality outside that room. I still don't have an address, a phone, or a way to keep showing up like that." "It could," she countered. He turned to face her. "How?" "I've been thinking about this since you started speaking in there. Leave them behind. We build something new. You and me, equal partners." His expression flickered, first surprise, then something sharper. "Claire, I'm serious. I have clients who'd follow me out tomorrow. You have the mind they'd kill to hire. I'm tired of winning deals that don't change anything that matters. You barely know me. I know you're the most talented analyst I've ever worked with. I know you've had every reason to quit and didn't. That's more than I can say for half the people in that firm. He studied her, weighing the offer like it was a stock with dangerous volatility. If we do this, it's not charity. I won't be your project. It's not charity, she said firmly. It's a partnership. Mutual risk, mutual reward. For a moment, neither of them moved. The city's hum seemed to pull back, like it was giving them space. Finally, Evan extended his hand. Partners. Partners, she echoed, gripping his palm. It felt like the first page of a contract written in something more permanent than ink. 3 weeks later, Price and Bennett Consulting had an office in Lodo, a corner suite with exposed brick, high ceilings, and a view of the mountains that made every coffee break feel like a stolen vacation. Claire had walked away from Bennett and Carrington with a severance package and a list of clients willing to take her calls. Evan had moved into a modest apartment a few blocks from the office, furnished enough to feel like a home, but still stripped of the clutter that most people thought was necessary. The firm's first big project was a valuation for a solar component manufacturer. Claire sat at the long oak conference table with her laptop open, while Evan spread financial statements like a gambler laying down a winning hand. They've been deliberately conservative with expansion, quality over quantity, but the manufacturing process they've designed can scale fast when demand spikes. That's a sleeping giant strategy. She smiled, leaning back. Sounds familiar. Evan glanced up, a ghost of a grin touching his mouth. What we're doing here, you mean? Exactly. The days blurred into a rhythm. Client meetings, late-night number crunching, long lunches where work bled into talk about their lives. Claire found herself telling him things she'd never shared with colleagues. He listened without judgment, without the calculation she'd learned to expect from people in her world. It wasn't just business. Something was shifting between them, subtle at first, like the gravity between two bodies slowly pulling them closer. She noticed the way he loosened his tie when they were working alone, the way his eyes warmed when she made him laugh. She caught herself looking forward to those moments more than the deals themselves. One morning, as the sun poured in through the brick-framed windows, Claire looked up from her inbox. "I got a call from Harrison Cole this morning," she said. Evan raised an eyebrow. "From Bennett and Carrington? They want us to consult on the Midwest precision follow-up. Apparently your projections were so dead on, they want ongoing analysis." Evan leaned back in his chair. "That's ironic. You mean them paying for expertise they could have had for free if they'd valued talent over pedigree?" "Exactly." She shut her laptop, moved to his side of the table. "6 months ago, I thought success meant climbing their ladder. Now I realize I was just limiting myself to their definition of success." "No regrets leaving?" "None." He hesitated. "What about trusting a stranger you found sleeping in your parking garage?" She held her gaze. "Best decision I ever made." Something shifted in the air. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "For me too," he said quietly. By the time summer bloomed over Denver, their client list had grown, and so had the unspoken current between them. They worked late together, sometimes in companionable silence, sometimes with music low in the background and the smell of takeout filling the room. Claire found herself memorizing the shape of his laugh, the way he tilted his head when thinking through a problem. One evening, as they reviewed a pitch for a social impact investor, she caught him watching her over the edge of his laptop. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," he said, but the corner of his mouth curved. "Evan?" He set the laptop aside, leaning forward. "I just realized, whatever this is we're building, it's the first time in years I've woken up excited to start the day. Not just because of the work, because of who I'm building it with." Her breath caught. "That sounds like more than business." "It is," he said simply. She looked down at her notes, then back at him. "For me too." The confession hung there, unpolished but certain. Neither of them moved to take it further, not yet. There was too much at stake, too much worth protecting. But the truth had been said, and it would not be unsaid. It wasn't all easy.
Some clients balked at Evan's background when they learned it, like the wealth management firm that ended their contract after reading an article about his past. But others sought them out because of it, valuing his perspective on risk and resilience. Claire saw how he handled those moments, without defensiveness, without apology. He was the same man who had sat across from her in Murphy's diner, telling her knowledge didn't lose value just because you did. One night as they locked up the office, she paused in the doorway. You know, if we keep attracting the right kind of clients, we might actually change what success looks like in this industry. Evan smiled, locking the door behind them, one deal at a time. They walked into the Denver evening side by side, their strides matching without thought. The streetlights cast their shadows long and parallel, stretching ahead like the path they were already on.
The first year of Price and Bennett Consulting was the kind of story business magazines love to tell. A lean, unexpected team rising fast, snagging clients from bigger firms, building a reputation for precision and integrity. But for Claire, the numbers and accolades were just the surface. The real story was what happened in the quiet spaces between deals, when she and Evan weren't strategizing for clients, but were building something of their own. By autumn, they had carved out 3 specialties: traditional business consulting, social impact investment analysis, and, Evan's idea, community financial education. That last one was the piece Claire hadn't known she was missing. It connected them to people who didn't speak in quarterly reports, people who just wanted to get out from under the kind of financial traps Evan had once been caught in. One Friday morning, Evan walked into her office holding a printed email. Denver Foundation wants to fund our literacy program. Full grant. We can run workshops for a year, free for participants. She looked up from her laptop, grinning. That's huge! He leaned against the doorframe, watching her reaction with that quiet satisfaction he got when the win was for something that mattered more than the bottom line. It means we can go bigger. More neighborhoods, more topics. Not just personal finance, but small business startup skills too. She stood, crossing the room to take the paper from him, but her hand lingered in his. You've built something incredible here. We've built it, he corrected, his voice warm. The pause between them stretched, loaded with the weight of everything unsaid. Claire's heart picked up. She'd known for months that the lines between business and something deeper had blurred. She also knew crossing fully into that territory would change everything. Again. He let go of her hand slowly. There's something I've been wanting to ask you. She tilted her head. Go on. Evan took a breath, the kind that seemed to steady him from the inside. Will you marry me? Her answer came without thought. Yes. The way he smiled then, relieved, certain, joyful, was a memory she knew would live in her forever. The engagement party was a mix of worlds that rarely met. Evan's family and friends filled the room with warmth and easy laughter, their hugs real, their congratulations sincere. Claire's circle was smaller. Some colleagues turned friends, a few relatives who approved of her life choices, others who were simply curious. Her father, a tall man with silver hair and the kind of voice that could command a courtroom, took Evan aside on the porch. Claire watched them from inside, heart beating hard until they returned. Later, she asked. He apologized, he said simply, for making assumptions when we met. Said he was wrong to question my worthiness. Claire blinked, surprised. That's progress. It's a start. The wedding was 6 months later at the Denver Botanic Gardens. The ceremony was small but rich with meaning. Traditions from both their backgrounds, a guest list that ranged from community organizers to corporate CEOs. Claire wore her grandmother's pearls and a fitted ivory gown that celebrated her curves without apology. Evan looked devastating in charcoal gray, his eyes steady on her as they said their vows. Do you, Claire, promise to support his dreams while pursuing your own, to build a partnership based on mutual respect and shared vision? I do. And do you, Evan, promise to challenge her to grow while accepting her completely, to honor your individual strengths and your collective vision? I do. When they kissed, it wasn't the kind of kiss people applauded for, though they did. It was the kind that sealed something private, something already written between them since that night in the garage.
The months that followed were busy in ways that tested them. Growth meant hiring, delegating, making harder calls. But it also meant more impact. Their literacy program expanded into 3 Denver neighborhoods, reaching over 300 families in its first year. Clients began to come to them not just for their analytical skill, but for their perspective on sustainable and ethical growth. One rainy Tuesday evening, they were the last 2 in the office. Papers were scattered on the conference table, the skyline blurred through the wet glass. "You realize," Claire said, flipping through a report, "that the Morrison Community Center wants us to run small business workshops next quarter. That's not just impact, it's legacy." He leaned back in his chair, watching her. "Funny, a year ago you were closing deals to make partner. Now you're talking about legacy." I smiled. "A year ago you were sleeping in my parking garage." He laughed, low and warm. "Yeah, that turned out okay." I set the papers aside, meeting his gaze. It turned out more than okay. The air between them went still. Even after months of marriage, there were moments like this, sudden and deep, when the enormity of what they'd built together hit her all over again. The following spring, the Denver Business Journal called. They wanted a follow-up to the first article they'd written about Evan, the one that had nearly cost them clients, but ended up redefining their niche. "How do you feel about it?" I asked him as we walked home that night, hands brushing in the cool air. "Proud," he said. "Not because of me, but because of us. We proved you can be successful without playing by rules that keep people out. We proved you can take a risk on someone and have it pay off, bigger than you imagined." I squeezed his hand. "That night, when I asked if you were hungry, I didn't know what would happen. I just knew I couldn't walk past you. And I didn't know if I could trust you," he admitted. "But I did, and it changed everything." We stopped at the corner before our building. The light from the street lamp painted them gold. "Evan," I said softly, "what if I told you I'd do it all again? Every risk, every fight, every sleepless night." He smiled, the way he had the first time she agreed to take him into the boardroom. "Then I'd tell you I'd still be in that parking garage, waiting for you to walk by." 1 year after their wedding, they stood side by side in their expanded office. 20 employees now, 3 practice areas, a client list that included not just corporations, but community organizations, schools, even a few nonprofits that had never considered hiring a consulting firm before. I looked out at the Denver skyline, glittering under the late sun. "Do you ever think about how much of this came from one choice?" "All the time," he said. "And I think about how close I was to missing it if you just kept walking that night." I turned to him. "You know, the title of our story is wrong." "How so?" "It's not, 'What if I could change everything?'" I said. "It's, 'We changed everything.'" He kissed me, the kind of kiss that felt like a closing line and beginning at the same time. And in that moment, I knew that our best work together was still ahead of us.